Hello, welcome to Sylvanimous Designs. So tonight I've got something a little special for you. I'm actually going to be doing something a little bit out of my own wheelhouse, and I'm going to be working on a project for a natural stone. What I've got here in front of me, this is sort of a pattern that I had scratched out the other night. I was practicing a few things. I wanted to experiment with some of these colors. Honestly, I was not 100% convinced when I started this. I was not all about the black with the burgundy and brown, but I think it turned out beautifully. And I really wanted to copy this over to something a little different. And again, I usually don't work on natural stone, so that's going to be my project tonight. Now, to show you what I personally do, so I drew this out, worked on it, and then as I work, now typically I'll draw this actually right in the book, but this time I did it on a sticky note because I intended to put something else down here for a little bit more practice. And essentially all I do is I start in the middle and I start jotting down what size tool I used for either what element or what color. So I've got a nice little guide here for myself so I know exactly what I'll be doing when I get this recreated. Okay, now as you've seen, this rock, I've held onto this rock for probably a year and a half now. It was when it came out of my garden, and I did finally go ahead and resin it. So it's beautifully smooth and shiny now. Okay, and again, the colors that I'm going to be using, I'm not adding any mediums or anything today. The resin is not only going to help seal this, I'm not going to leave it outdoors, but it is going to help seal it and make any corrections, goodness forbid I need to make any, easy. All right, so the colors that I've got here, I've got a little bit of a mix. So I've got the black, deep burgundy, this nutmeg brown, a warm buff, and then as some highlights or top dot accents, I've got champagne gold. I've got all of this laid out in my palette. I've got a nice warm wet cloth up here to get everything wiped up on. And then over here, I have got my stencil and an expo marker, which is what I'm gonna plot my lines on with. Okay, let's get working on that. Now, I will be using the 8-lined stencil here. And obviously my rock is not exactly symmetrical, but I do have 2 longer tips, which I'm gonna align. And then with this, I just have a itty bitty teeny tiny roll of tape on the back so that once I've got it all lined up perfectly here, right where I want it, I can just press that down and I don't lose my stencil as I go. Now I don't need to mark every single one of these lines going all the way to the top, but I do want to mark these first couple and then the 2 at the very top, just so I kind of have that guideline as to where my real edges are here. Now I think, all right, this is going to be essentially the top here, and I'm going to draw any lines in that are going to touch this outer ring. All right, I think I've got enough of the lines. So let me just pull that up. All right, so now I have a good idea of where everything is going to be laid out. Now this is going to be the bottom here. This rock does actually have a nice flat bottom on that side. All right, I think we are ready to rock and roll. Now, because this particular design is not going to fit completely on my rock, what I might end up doing is altering a few of the sizes by just 0.5 from what I initially did. So we'll see where that goes. All right, so I'm going to start out with a 10 for the black and do my best to get this nice and centered. All right, now I'm going to drop into my 1 and we're going to go into this nice beige here. I essentially know how many dots will fit around the circle based on my practice, but I still am going to go by the northeast, west, south kind of compass just to make sure that there are no mistakes. Okay, now I'm going to move up to a 2.5 and I'm going to go into just my nutmeg brown here. And again, I'm just going to follow this pattern. Next up, I'm going to move over to the 5.5, so the 5.5, and we're going to go back in the black. And I'm hesitating here just a little bit because I had a 5.5 initially on the original, but I'm actually going to move down to just a 5 on this one as I'm looking because, again, I do want more of the design to fit on the rock. Now it is on to the walked dots that are up here. Now we want to start out with just one row of walked dots, and these are going to be in that same light brown, that buff color. I'm going to start the top dot of this with the size 2. Again, these are all going to be right on the compass line. Then I'm going to go into the 1.5 and we'll do the actual walked portion of these. Especially with these small walk dots, you want to make sure that you're cleaning and drying off your tool in between a few rows to make sure that all of your dots stay nice and symmetrical. All right, now I've got that done. So we've got our first row. And we actually don't do an additional or second row with this particular one. I'm gonna move right on up to the swooshes. These I do with my smallest dot tool. This end is the 0.5. I'm gonna go into a 5.5 size tool here. And I'm gonna dip into my nice deep burgundy. Now these, I kind of want to start the dot somewhere right above the end or the top here of where the walked dots are. So if you would draw a line between them, this is right above. Okay, so I did not go completely around, obviously, with my other lines, but really wasn't all that necessary. Except, you know what, I wasn't paying much attention here and I moved this just too far to the right. So I'm gonna get that off of there. All right, let's try that again. I'm gonna go back into the 5.5 here. Okay, there we go. All right, now for the swooshes, I take the paint from the center and we're gonna drag that down towards here, right towards the center. We're gonna go to the midline of the dot and pull this down. The same on the other side. So now I kind of have this guideline here. And then I just take and pull the center right down in. Okay, just like coloring. And that's that for a beautiful little swoosh. All right, so I'm gonna do this all the way around. The other benefit of the resin here or any other kind of spray varnish is that, especially when you're doing these swooshes, they go on so smoothly. The paint just glides across and makes these so simple. I also find that on the surfaces that have been varnished, resined, or something like glass, I also don't need as much paint for something like the swooshes as I would on, say, a paper surface or something like that. Since the paint moves so easily and does not have the pores of either the natural rock or paper, for example, to soak into. Again, you really don't even need as much paint as you might typically. Now that I'm done with that, now I'm actually going to clean off my tool. Now I'm going to drop down to a 3.5 and we're going to do brown swooshes on either side. All I'm doing for these ones is essentially filling in the gap right between the edge of the swoosh here and these walked dots. Now these two, unfortunately, I just accidentally pushed a little too close together. So I'm going to remove the one. Now every now and again, you might see me dip this tool into a little bit of paint. For any reason, maybe there just quite wasn't enough on the original dot, because this particular brown especially is a little thinner than the rest of my paints. So I do tend to do that every now and again. All right, so those ones are done. I'm going to wipe my tool off. Now I know that brown is pretty dark, and as of right now, it is tending to blend back into the rock. Once I get everything finished, I will go back in with some highlights and bring that up. All right, now I'm gonna go into a 3 here. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make just a tiny little landing dot, at least that's what I call them, right here between these brown ones, right on the line. Now I'm gonna hop up. Now this initially was a 7. Again, I think I'm gonna run out of room. So instead of a 7, I think I'm gonna drop down to a 6. Yeah, I think a 6 will be okay. And we're gonna go into a light brown here. And then this, like I said, it is my landing dot. At least that's what I like to call it, because that is going to signify right where I need to put this one. It's going to sit right on top of it. Okay, now that that one is done, I have a dot that is essentially going to go here and again be a landing dot. And essentially it was a 5. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go down a tool size. I'm going to go down to a 4. So we're going to have a black one here for the landing. Okay, so now we're going to do some walked dots around these ones. Again, we might be a little shy on space, so I'm going to drop that down a half a size. I did a 2.5, so I'm going to go into a 2, and we are going to start with a dark brown. So I'm going to do a 2 right on top of all of these. Again, kind of as the starter dot for our walk. Now I'm going to go from the 2 to the 1.5, and we're going to walk. Now for the second set of walk dots, I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to adjust by a half a size. I'm going to go up to the 3 and then do a 2.5 for the walk size. And this is going to be my burgundy. Now it's time for our fancy little swooshes. Again, we're going to do a quick adjustment for the sizes, and I'm going to move from a 4.5 down to a 4. Now, all 3 of the swooshes that I'm going to be doing, the brown, the burgundy, and then a small black one as well, will all be the same size of 4. Now for these long ones, I am dipping this tool into the paint as well. And then you first want to make sure that you draw the line against the walked dot. And then simply bring this corner down to meet the other end. I personally don't like the really sharp tails on dots, on walked or on swooshes. So all I do is blend out the tail until I've got it to more of a teardrop shape that I like. Now that is completely up to you. All right, I think I've got all of the initial brown swooshes done. So again, I'm gonna go into the same 4 size, and now I'm gonna go down to the burgundy color. And we're gonna do it all over again. The only difference that I'm making this time is that the position of this dot, that was a lot of paint, is just going to be slightly farther down, kind of into, if you actually look at the walked dots here, this one started in the first crook. This second one started in the second crook there of the dots. So hopefully that kind of gives you a better idea of where I'm sort of aiming with these. Another set of swooshes down, and now we're on to the last one, which is the black. Same 4, and again we're just going to go down kind of another slot here so that it sits there, and then it'll be a nice small kind of fat chunky one. This last swoosh is less of a long one, as it is just a traditional kind of teardrop shape. All right, now those black ones are down, and then we're gonna work with the dots on this side. Now, I'm doing these kind of walked dots just a little bit differently. What I'm actually gonna do, I am going to go ahead and start with a 4 as well on this side, but then instead of doing a traditional walk dot, I'm just going to continue going down in size, a half a step for each dot after this one. And unfortunately, I'm not having a real good spot for my hand in here, so give me a quick second to figure out a nice spot to start here. All right, and then we're gonna put just that initial dot all the way around. Now, we've got all of those sides done. Now, the last part of this is we're gonna have a kind of a crown on top here. And I've gotta be a little bit careful because I don't know exactly how much of this is gonna fit. But again, I'm gonna scale back. I'm gonna go from a 3.5 to a 3 to start with, and I'm going to dip into the burgundy here. Now I still have a little bit of a remnant of a line that would have been, you know, the compass lines through here, and I'm just going to squeeze a dot right on top here on either side of that line for each of these. Now for the last dot, I'm actually going to move up a half a size to the 3.5. Great. So essentially, that concludes all of the main dots. Now I get to go back in with some top dots. For these ones, I picked up a 2.5, and I want to make sure that the dot is right on the bottom, right, so that it meets up with that original landing dot right below it. Now what I'm going to do is, at least for the swooshes, the two darker colors up here, I'm going to take the beige and go into a 3, and then I'm just going to put a dot right in the center of the swoosh for those two. That's it for all of those colors. Now we're going to move on to my top dot gold. Now for the gold, because this is mostly just quick work, I'm going to be dotting right out of the lid. Just to pick up some of this dark brown, I've decided to add a little tiny bit of this silver. Now I picked this silver because the color of it is almost a pearl white, and so it does look pretty good against this brown and blends in pretty well with the rest of the colors here, and it'll give it that extra shine. That should take care of it. Now, once this dries, I will go back in and wipe off, and you can see here the remaining expo marker just wipes right off. So once this is completely dry, I'll just take a nice soft rag and wipe all of those extra lines off. Then we'll go ahead and spray it in a clear varnish just to make sure that the color stays nice and bright and doesn't disappear. When it is sprayed, even though it is very shiny as it is right now, that will again continue to bring up the color. Now, obviously, it doesn't look exactly the same as this one. Certainly on the black background, it certainly does stand out quite a bit more. But I think as this one dries and I get it covered, I think it's gonna look beautiful. All right, well, thank you so much for tuning in today. I certainly do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care and have a great day.